Facebook Live today. We're talking with two grief counselors from Gilchrist, Amanda Jaska and Dawn Tippett. Amanda and Dawn, thanks so much for coming in today. It's an important topic, and it's not one that people are always comfortable talking about. At Gilchrist, it's a hospice facility. You're dealing with families going through, in some cases, some of the worst times of their lives, and you have to help them through that. How do you do that on a daily basis?
It's, a part of the job. It's part of what we signed up for. Looking at grief, and I'm sure Dawn can speak to that too. It's a healing process. So we get to see people when they're, like you said, going through one of the worst things they've ever been through in their lives, and helping them to grow from that, helping to see someone go from here to hopefully here. It's not like that with everybody, but that's, I think a lot of what I get out of it is being able to just kind of be someone who's comfortable with that, when a lot of people tend to shy away from speaking about just the topic of grief, like it's taboo.
And Dawn, the issue is that people who have had a loved one go through something like that, they're left behind. But I think the message can be that over time it does improve. Like, can they get better, or how do they? What kind of progress do you see over time with the people that you help?
It's interesting too, because I think people, and I think our culture really expects that 3 months is maybe it, and that's when maybe some of the support starts to go away, and just the expectations are that you're feeling better and how you're doing, and then the grieving person is putting on that mask to the outside world, so everybody says, oh, you look like you're doing fine. But so I hear what you're saying, and that there definitely is healing over time, but this is, any kind of grief is a wound that doesn't fully go away. You're always going to miss that person. What you're figuring out how to do is to move forward, and how to bring that person with you forward as you start creating a new life. Yeah.
And does talking with someone who's helped other people through these situations, does that help someone who's going through a situation like that to come in and talk about it?
Mm-hmm. A lot of times, well, I'm biased because I'm a counselor, so we've been trained for that. But when clients come in and I'll sit down and talk to them, I'll let them know this is a space for you to heal, to be able to come in and talk about things, like we said before, that people don't usually talk about. I'll say, you know what, I'm not your friend, I'm not your family, I'm your counselor. It's a safe space where they can come in and don't have to worry about burdening someone, or a lot of times when Dawn mentioned, it's not something that just goes away right off the bat. But when they think, am I going crazy? Am I the only one who's going through this? Or if this family member's grief's looking different than mine, what's wrong? To be able to have someone come in and just listen to you, a lot of times can help, just with that feeling of not having the burden completely on themselves, and just to help to normalize and validate.
And a lot of what we do, exactly, especially in those first couple of sessions, really is to normalize. And because I have people come in and say, if I tell you what I'm thinking, I think you might send me to Shepherd Pratt. Because you feel like you're going crazy, and you're getting advice and thoughts from everybody about what this should look like. And to be able to have somebody tell you that there are no shoulds with grief, and that it's going to look like it's going to look. And to have somebody who, and you'd asked earlier about kind of why we do, and I just feel like we're all given different gifts, things that we can do. I don't think I could do what you do every day, but I've learned that I can sit with somebody in their pain. And that's what people need, is just to be heard. There's not any words that really you can say that fixes this, right? Mm-hmm. But to have somebody who can just sit with you and let you be where you are. Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating, and I'm hoping that some people are getting to watch this. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in, and I'll pass those along for you. People want to feel, if you ask someone how they're doing, I'm fine, is probably the most common answer. So I'm wondering if there really is a set time when you do feel better, or that you can say you're better, or if there's a certain time when you will start to feel better. What are some of the things you've seen in your careers as far as people recovering from something happening to a family member?
Well, there's what we call the normal grief process, which again is different for everybody. But a lot of times when people are saying, oh, I'm fine initially off the bat, They might feel like they're fine because they have loved ones, friends, families reaching out, bringing them the casseroles, asking how they're doing. But then over time, those calls start to go away because I think the belief is, well, you should be getting better. Things are supposed to get better, get better, get better. When in essence, what tends to happen is once reality really starts sinking in and, you go to the grocery store and want to call and say, can I pick something up for you? And you can't make that phone call. That's when things start to get more difficult and get harder, especially, once we start rounding the fall into the end of the year. That's when we have a lot of holidays and special occasions coming up that might not have been there initially right off the bat. So our what we typically say is it's going to take as long as it takes. But some people will say, the first year's the most difficult because of all the firsts. Other clients will say, well, the first year I was in shock the whole time. So the second year things felt more real and it was a little more difficult.
Do you think we know more about grief than in previous years? Because you hear cases of people who had something happen to them and they never really got better, but maybe they didn't get the help that they could have needed at that time.
I think what's important to remember that grief is just a very natural part of living. We are all going to experience loss and grief, and it is, and truly, when I think about how many people die under our Gilchrist services and then how many people we actually see, people with good coping skills and really good supports in their friendships and family usually don't necessarily need to come in and see somebody because this is so natural. So just remembering how normal this process is, I think, is really important for people. I think we tend to forget that.
So what are some of the impacts of grief that it can have on you, especially if you don't get out and seek some help? What can that do to a person?
You want to?
Sure. I think we always think of crying and sadness and that, but I think people don't realize how physical grief can be. With the maybe the heart palpitations or and there's people are thinking they're having a heart attack or GI issues or, and just even there's great forgetfulness, there's great exhaustion. Grief can just be so exhausting because you're just trying to deal with this and you're trying to be up if you have to go to work or if you have to deal with children, so I think there's a lot of those things that people don't associate with grief.
Yeah, it's not just the emotional process. It's not just the sadness, anger, loneliness, but as Dawn mentioned, a lot of the physical responses and just cognitive. A lot of times that forgetfulness, especially when I've had clients who've lost a loved one to dementia or Alzheimer's, they'll say, "Oh, I'm forgetful. I feel like I'm getting early onset." And no, not really. This is part of the process that you're going through. But if you have any concerns, go see your doctor. Go meet with your general practitioner and get a full-on physical and get checked out and make sure you are doing okay.
We have our traditions in society. Typically, if there's a death in the family or a friend, there's a funeral. There's you mentioned the casserole. At times, you bring things over and help So what do people do, or what can people do to help a close friend or a loved one who's had a death in the family or lost someone that they love?
I think being available and not waiting for, here's the big one, it's like, if you need anything, call me. It's like, well, I'm telling you, a grieving person is just not going to pick up the phone.
Really?
It takes too much energy. And then it's like, well, I don't want to burden them because, well, they have a family and, there's just all of that, so to put that on the griever who is just so devastated and then to put this part on them. So it's step up. I'm going to the grocery store. What can I get for you? I'm about to do my laundry. Let me grab yours. Just really concrete ways. And then to not after 3 or 4 months, send a card, make the phone call, keep just and I don't always like everything about cell phones and social media, but what's really great about texting is that the griever doesn't have to answer, but can take that in and know that somebody's thinking of them. So those are some of the things that I think. I don't know if you...
Just, something small like that can make a difference.
Make a difference.
Yeah.
And being patient, just recognizing that person might not want to go out and do this or go out and do that, even if you are offering. But, you're offering, and that's one of the keys, is just being able to be there so that they can feel supported, because it's going to look different for everybody. And it's sometimes better just to give a hug than to say, oh, they're in a better place, or
because
they
then
lived
you
a long
just say
life.
that I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Instead of saying one of these platitudes, be honest, I don't know what to say, but I'm here to listen. And that is huge. That is huge.
That's good advice. And I'm joined again by Amanda Jaska and Dawn Tippett from Gilchrist, two grief counselors here taking your questions. We are getting some comments here through the WMAR2 News Facebook page. But I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the holidays, and it's not necessarily that the death in the family has just happened. It sounds like you're saying you could feel the impacts months later than the actual event, potentially even worse than it felt right after it happened. That's interesting.
Oh, yes. And, especially around this time of year, we have the very, high holy days for our Jewish clients and our Jewish families. And then we have, Christmas coming up at the end of the year, but Thanksgiving, a holiday.
Family holiday.
Yeah, food, family, and people start talking about this back in, June. Just what am I going to do at the end of the year? So it's one of those things that's always on the mind.
Is that considered stressful for a person who's going through a grieving process? Is that just an extra stress or something?
Well, I'm just thinking about how stressful the holidays are, even when we're not grieving, right? So that you add this on. And so one of the tips that we give is to have a plan A and have a plan B. Because you're going to have this plan, maybe the plan is to go and be with family. But the plan B, and you've communicated this with family, is like, I might wake up that morning and think, I cannot do this. And, and as long as that's been communicated to everybody and everybody's good with that, and have an escape plan. If you're going to one of these holiday gatherings, don't go in somebody's car. If you can drive yourself so that you've put in your time and you feel like, I can't be here one more minute. You're able to get yourself out of it.
That's what a lot of people are asking on the Facebook page, is what's your best advice for people close to someone who's going through this. And it sounds like there are a lot of things that you can do to help out that you might not think of if you haven't been through it yourself in the first place.
Well, and I'm even thinking, like, for these holidays, or even if it's not the holidays, and maybe it's a book club or something like that, be that friend who is you give me the signal, I'm leaving with you, and it's okay. That there's don't feel guilty that you're pulling me away from this. That's just a lovely thing that you can do for a friend, just sort of help them be that escape route, and.
So when someone comes in to speak with you to get some counseling, how often do they talk? Is it like every week you want to see them, or is it whenever? And how long do those sessions typically last, as far as months and months, or are they in perpetuity for some people?
I think, it depends on the individual. At Gilchrist, we're here for, typically around 13 months following a loss. And we see individuals who might come in 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line, or might be doing okay until, oops, here comes the holiday season, or I've got a birthday or an anniversary of a death popping up. So we might see people just, once. They might come in and just want to know, is this normal? What can I expect? What does the grief process look like? So it might just be that standalone meeting, which is perfectly fine. You don't have to call us up and come on in and, like a gym membership, think you need to come in and get your money's worth, because we, for our Gilchrist families, there is no charge to come and see us. We're time limited, but we don't turn anybody away. Even from the community, we'll have clients who might have lost a loved one suddenly, and they're more than welcome to come in and see us. And typically our sessions last about an hour, and that, again, varies depending on need as far as how frequently we'll see them.
A lot of the comments we're seeing are not even necessarily asking a question, but they're just people who are pleased with the services they've gotten at Gilchrist in the past.
Wonderful.
So they're either recommending, or they're just saying that they do appreciate the time. And I'm wondering if that has something to do with the fact that it has to be, for the vast majority of people, such an unfamiliar situation to go through. You're just not used to dealing with this, whereas
And there's really no guide. I mean, there's a lot of books out there, but there's no guidebook. There is no preparing for. It's very interesting, because I'll have people say, well, maybe perhaps they'd had a long 10-year Alzheimer's sort of illness. And then they'll come in and say to me, it's like, but I knew this was coming. I was prepared. But there is no preparing for what this really feels like, the absence of this person, you know? And so you cannot imagine what this feels like. You can't be ready for that.
In your work, have you noticed over the years a difference between people who are dealing with a sudden death in a family, perhaps from an act of violence or a car crash, versus a long-term illness like Alzheimer's and dementia, where you do know that something is coming?
Right.
Have you noticed a difference in the family members dealing with those two different types of grief?
That's the big debate. That's the one that, you know, I think any counselor will have encountered at some point, is meeting with a client who might say, well, you know, I think going through and experiencing a sudden death is worse than experiencing losing someone over a long period of time, because I didn't have time to say goodbye. I didn't have time to, you know, I didn't have time to prepare. Meanwhile, we'll meet with people on the other end of the spectrum, like you said, who might have experienced our hospice care. And I said, you know what, I watched my loved one decline, you know, over months, over weeks, over years, and just watching them, you know, just slip away.
Strong person that's,
Yeah.
you know, wasting away, and then how exhausted they are
Yeah.
from the caregiving, you know, wanting to be there, but, you know, just, and the toll that long-term caregiving takes on somebody.
Safe to say that both forms can
You
be
can't win.
difficult for people
In
depending
different
on their
ways.
situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are some pretty, you know, significant differences, you know, with different types of losses. You know, if someone's had a loved one, perhaps who's died due to a homicide, might be facing a trial coming up, you know, which is a whole other part of grief that comes in. You know, we see a lot of, or it's growing now, losses due to the opioid epidemic. So we started a group the two of our counselors run to help support those family members, because sometimes they don't know where they fit in.
And in some cases, those are younger people who have died in the opioid crisis that is ongoing. Do you have any advice for that type of grief as far as a parent? You never want to bury a child, but that's got to be different from what you would normally expect in society, which would be the death of a parent. Is that different as far as dealing with that part of it?
I think one of the probably one of the hard parts is just a big feeling of guilt. You know, I should have been able to stop this. I should have gotten more help. Even though I'm sure so many of them were every avenue trying to do whatever they could to give them the support that was needed. But I think there is a lot of guilt, and I think for those parents, getting out and being with other parents, finding groups, finding that kind of support, I think is really key. You know,
That can help. Interesting. Understand there's some events coming up for Gilchrist that you wanted to talk about. What's going on over there that can help some people?
Absolutely.
Oh yes, we have. Well, we always have something going on. We have a very robust schedule, especially, you know, into the fall, into the spring, and so our first event coming up is going to be on Sunday. It's a Sunday event, November 3rd. It's our annual Twilight in the Woods event that we hold at the Chrysalis down at Symphony Woods in Columbia, and it's an outdoor event, and it gives family members a time to come and reflect and remember their loved one. We have a candle lighting. We read some names out loud of their loved ones. We honor fallen heroes. So if their loved one was a veteran or was a fallen firefighter, you know, EMS, police officer, we have a section devoted to that. We have music, and it really is beautiful. It's a rain or shine event, and it's open to anyone in the community. So we have more information about that up on our webpage.
And that's a place where you could meet other people going through some
Yep.
similar
Absolutely.
situation.
And the lovely thing about something like that is that the whole family can come. And we've had 12, 20 members of a family come to some of our bigger events like this to be able to grieve together and honor their loved one together. And like you said, and be with other grievers and not feel so alone.
Gilchrist is known for hospice services. Caitlin is asking about this, what happens after, you know, and how you can help family members after a loved one has died. And we've been talking about that, but just talk a little more about the continuing services for family members after there's a death in the family.
So with Gilcrest, if their loved one was one of our patients, we follow up first with a phone call to check in and just to make sure the family is aware that we offer support and that we're here, throughout it the next year, which is, quite some time. So we reach out that way. But in Gilcrest, aside from the individual counseling that we provide, we also do, like we said, in addition to the community events, support groups, workshops, different ways to connect people in grief in a community so that they can sit next to somebody who's gone through a similar type of loss, might not know exactly what they're experiencing, but say, oh, you know what? What helped you? And sometimes clients will come in and they'll say, wow, you'll never believe what I heard from this group. And they'll be saying something. I'm thinking, I think I've been saying that for the past couple of weeks that we've been meeting. It sounds kind of familiar, but hearing it from somebody, a peer.
It gets through.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, if there's been a death in the family or if someone's dealing with grief, they're better off getting some help with it and not just keeping it in. I mean, that's the bottom line, right?
And we offer so many things, and we offer chair yoga. We offer breathing through grief. We offer art. Because there's just, there's different parts of the brain and there's different ways to get to the grief. So it doesn't necessarily have to be sitting one-on-one with one of the counselors in a room. It could be a group. It's one of these special workshops. One of our counselors has started. We sponsor now a tree for the Kennedy Krieger at the Festival of Trees. And our bereaved. Each year there's a theme, and they'll make the ornaments for it. So they all come together, and so it's not like a support group, but there they are together making these ornaments that'll go on this tree that we are sponsoring. And it's just so, we try and meet people's needs in so many different ways.
And can people attend some of the support groups beyond that 13-month timeline? If something comes back or if they start feeling that grief again, what can you do then?
So usually, if that's the case, if the death has occurred in the past, we'll have anyone who comes to one of our groups come and meet with a counselor first. So we have the opportunity to check in with them just to see, okay, well, is the group really a good fit for you? Or perhaps, it would be meeting with one of us individually, or, if their needs are beyond our scope, being able to say, well, here are some referrals to, counselors or some programs in the community that you might fit better, at. But Dawn has a group that she runs.
We have a grief in the second year group.
Uh-huh.
It started out for spouses, and that's mainly who comes, but I do have now a couple of people that come for parental loss because people were saying, but I'm not done yet. And a lot of spouses say, and this goes back to one of your earlier questions, that I think the how long, a lot of these people are saying this second year is harder. And it's because you've gotten through all those firsts and had all that support. Now you really are at a place where everybody thinks you're all better. And they're finding it's like, but this was my life partner. This was my future. These were our plans. And now what? And they're really grappling with that. So to be able to have a place to come once a month, to be with other people that get that, yeah, this is still hard. And it's okay.
Before we let you go, where can people go get some more information about the services offered at Gilcrest and what, even some of the things like the chair yoga and the art and all that stuff? Where can you find out about that?
So you can go to our website, which is www.gilcrestcares.org. And so on that page, there's a tab for counseling and support, and that's where you'd want to click, and you can find out more information about either individual counseling or our events or our groups, or you can give us a call at 443-849-8251.
Okay. Well, it's been a real pleasure meeting both of you and speaking with you this morning. And I hope some people got to take something from this because it's an important discussion and it's not something that everybody is comfortable talking with. So we're going to leave the Facebook Live discussion up on our Facebook page, the WMAR2news.com Facebook page as well. And if you have any more questions, feel free to submit those and we'll get them over to the counselors for you as well. But Amanda Jaska, Dawn Tippett, counselors, grief counselors from Gilcrest, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having
us.
Thank you very much for watching.